Has this ever happened to you? You're sitting on the couch, your cat jumps on your lap, starts purring, everything seems perfect, and then, out of nowhere, they turn around and bite you. No warning, no apparent reason. You didn't do anything different, and yet there it is, tooth marks and confusion. It's frustrating, it's a little hurtful, and honestly, it makes you wonder if your cat even likes you. Hi, I'm Larissa, I'm a veterinarian, and today I need to talk about one of the most misunderstood feline behaviors I see in clinical practice, petting-induced aggression, also known as overstimulation biting. And I want to be very clear from the very first minute, your cat is not being mean, and they absolutely don't hate you. There are very specific biological and behavioral reasons behind what's happening, and once you understand them, your entire relationship with your cat can change. If you live with a cat, young, adult, or senior, this video is for you. Stay with me until the end because what I'm about to share may completely transform the way you and your cat experience daily life together. To understand why cats bite during petting sessions, I need to start with something that might sound obvious but is actually fundamental. Cats are not small dogs. I know. But when it comes to social behavior, the difference is enormous, and it changes everything. Dogs evolved alongside humans for tens of thousands of years as pack animals who actively sought social contact and prolonged physical bonding. Cats, on the other hand, are solitary hunters by nature. Their wild ancestors didn't live in groups that required constant physical closeness. They are highly independent animals with a much lower default tolerance for prolonged tactile contact than most of us assume. This evolutionary background is not a flaw, it's biology. And it explains why the same gesture that feels like love to us can quickly become overwhelming and aversive to a cat. The condition I'm describing is called petting-induced aggression. And in veterinary behavioral medicine, we sometimes also use the term overstimulation aggression. This is a recognized behavioral syndrome in which a cat that is initially receptive to petting, calm, purring, apparently relaxed, suddenly reaches a threshold of sensory overload and responds with a bite or a scratch. It is not random, even when it feels that way. It is the cat's final communication attempt after a sequence of subtler signals that we humans consistently miss. And here is what surprises most people. This is extremely common. Feline aggression directed at owners is one of the most frequently reported behavioral complaints in veterinary behavioral consultations, and petting-induced aggression is consistently identified as one of the primary presentations. Beaver documented this as a leading behavioral complaint in feline clinical practice as early as 2003. Is there a specific profile most affected? Not exclusively, but cats that had limited positive human contact during the critical developmental window, which runs from approximately 2 to 7 weeks of age, tend to have lower lifelong tolerance for handling. Turner and Bateson described this socialization period in detail, demonstrating that kittens with minimal tactile exposure in those weeks are significantly more reactive to touch in adulthood. Additionally, senior cats developing chronic pain conditions, arthritis being the most common, may show progressive intolerance to petting that looks identical to behavioral overstimulation. Age always matters in this differential. So let's get into the mechanism, because this is where things become genuinely fascinating. That bite that seems to come out of nowhere has a very precise explanation in veterinary behavioral science. It is the endpoint of what we call low stimulation threshold, and it comes paired with a phenomenon known as progressive tactile sensitization. Cats have a nervous system that processes tactile input very differently from ours. Each individual hair follicle is connected to sensory nerve endings that continuously transmit touch information to the brain. In the beginning of a petting session, that input is genuinely pleasant. It activates reward pathways, lowers stress, and can be calming. But here is the critical point. Repetitive stimulation of the same nerve endings over time produces something called neural recruitment. The signal doesn't stay flat, it builds, it accumulates. And for many cats, that accumulation reaches an aversive threshold far faster than we expect. The brain stops registering the touch as pleasant and starts registering it as intrusive, or even painful. And the cat does the most logical thing available to them. They bite to make it stop. Not out of malice, out of communication. This mechanism has been described thoroughly in the veterinary behavioral literature by Overall and further by Landsberg, Hunthausen, and Ackerman, who outline the neurological basis of sensory overload and the feline bite response in clinical detail. Now, here is where I need to be responsible with you. Overstimulation is not the only explanation for a cat that bites during petting, and I would not be doing my job properly if I told you otherwise. Pain, from arthritis, dental disease, dermatological conditions, or a condition called feline hyperesthesia syndrome, where the skin itself becomes pathologically hypersensitive, can look exactly like petting-induced aggression. Redirected aggression, where a cat has been aroused by an external stimulus, a bird at the window, another animal in the house, and redirects that arousal onto the closest available target, is another frequent presentation. Fear-based aggression and play aggression in younger, understimulated cats are also on the differential list. I never attribute a bite to overstimulation without first ruling out a pain component, and neither should your veterinarian. Here is what I most need to reframe for you today. The bite did not come out of nowhere. Your cat communicated their discomfort very clearly, through a specific, observable sequence of warning signals. And what happened is that we, as humans, were never taught how to read them. That is not your fault. But starting right now, you will know exactly what to look for. The first signal is tail movement, not the slow, gentle sway of a content cat. I'm talking about a tail that begins to flick, twitch, or lash at the base with growing speed and tension. This is one of the earliest visible indicators of rising arousal and agitation. The moment you notice that tail start to move with any kind of force during a petting session, your cat is telling you something very clearly. The second signal is skin rippling or twitching along the back, particularly near the tail base. This is a direct physical response to tactile overstimulation. The muscles beneath the skin contract involuntarily as the sensory input becomes aversive. In some cats, it is dramatic. In others, it is subtle, but it is always meaningful. The third signal is ear rotation. When a cat's ears begin to rotate sideways or flatten rearward, what is sometimes called airplane ears, they are signaling escalating irritation. This shift in ear position is one of the clearest posture-based indicators that the emotional state has changed. The fourth signal is a change in body tension. A relaxed cat has a soft, loose body. A cat approaching their bite threshold will often become visibly rigid, muscles tensing, posture stiffening, in a way that is very different from the stillness of a sleeping or resting animal. The fifth signal is cessation of purring combined with dilated pupils. Many owners tell me, "My cat was purring and then just bit me." That's exactly right. The purring reflected a state of comfort, and its sudden absence, paired with wide pupils and a fixed gaze, indicates that the internal state has shifted rapidly. The sixth signal is the cat turning their head toward your hand. This is typically the last warning in the sequence. The cat is tracking your hand, preparing to intercept it if the stimulation continues. Together, these signals form what behavioral scientists call the feline aggression ladder, a progressive sequence of communication that begins subtly and escalates until the cat feels their message has been received. Research by Casey and Bradshaw demonstrated that cats consistently display these pre-aggression signals, and that owners fail to recognize them primarily due to a lack of behavioral education. This is fixable, and you have now fixed it. The diagnosis of petting-induced aggression requires a complete behavioral history and a full physical examination to rule out pain as a contributing or primary cause. Which brings me to the next section. Recognizing the warning signals at home is essential, but it does not replace a veterinary visit, and I want to be very direct about why. When a cat that has historically tolerated petting suddenly starts biting, or when the biting appears to be intensifying, the very first clinical priority is ruling out pain. A cat in pain from arthritis, from a dental abscess, from a dermatological condition, or from feline hyperesthesia syndrome, where the skin becomes pathologically hypersensitive to touch, will display behavior that is clinically indistinguishable from pure overstimulation biting. If we miss that pain component, no behavioral intervention in the world will resolve the problem. A proper diagnostic workup begins with a complete physical examination, with focused attention to the areas your cat reacts to when touched, typically the lumbar spine, the tail base, and the abdomen. An orthopedic evaluation for degenerative joint disease is particularly important in cats over 8 years of age, and I want you to understand why. A landmark study published by Slingerland and colleagues in 2011 found radiographic evidence of degenerative joint disease in more than 90% of cats over 12 years of age. 90%. Feline arthritis is massively underdiagnosed, largely because cats hide pain exceptionally well, an evolutionary survival strategy, and because many owners interpret increased touch sensitivity as attitude rather than a clinical sign. From a laboratory standpoint, a complete wellness panel, blood work including a complete blood count, biochemistry, and thyroid function in cats over 7, helps rule out systemic conditions such as hyperthyroidism, which is known to increase irritability and lower aggression thresholds significantly. A urinalysis may be included as well. When imaging is warranted, radiographs of the spine and limbs are my first choice for evaluating arthritic change. In cases where skin hypersensitivity is the primary complaint, a dermatological workup and biopsy may also be necessary. Regarding preventive care, the American Association of Feline Practitioners recommends at minimum 1 complete wellness examination per year for adult cats, with increasing frequency for seniors. Critically, I advocate for a behavioral component to be included in every wellness visit, not just physical parameters. Catching behavioral changes early is diagnostically equivalent to catching physical ones. I want to be completely honest with you before we talk about management. If your cat has always had a low tolerance for prolonged petting, the goal is not to turn them into a lap cat who loves hour-long strokes. That is not a realistic or fair expectation. But, and this is very important, the situation can improve meaningfully, and you and your cat can absolutely build a relationship grounded in mutual comfort and respect. That is both realistic and achievable. The first and most foundational pillar of management is allowing your cat to control the interaction. This is not a small thing. It is supported directly by behavioral research. Cats given the choice of when to initiate and terminate physical contact display significantly lower stress indicators and fewer aggressive episodes overall. In practice, this means let your cat come to you rather than reaching for them. Keep petting sessions short and deliberate rather than long and continuous, and stop at the very first warning signal, the tail flick, the skin twitch, the ear rotation, rather than waiting to see if they get over it. They won't. The second pillar is identifying your specific cat's preferred contact zones. Research consistently shows that most cats are significantly more comfortable being touched around the facial area, the forehead, cheeks, and chin, and markedly less tolerant of petting along the dorsal midline and toward the tail base, which is precisely the area most people instinctively reach for. Adjusting your technique to honor that preference and staying consistently within your cat's comfort zone reduces overstimulation events dramatically. The third pillar, frequently underestimated, is environmental enrichment and chronic stress reduction. Chronic stress lowers a cat's tolerance threshold across every domain, including physical contact. Ensuring adequate vertical space, accessible hiding spots, appropriate outlets for predatory behavior through structured play sessions, and a stable daily routine all contribute to a cat that is more emotionally regulated and therefore more resilient to tactile stimulation. Work by Amat and colleagues demonstrated a clear relationship between environmental stressors and the frequency of feline aggression directed at owners. When pain is identified as a contributing factor, appropriate veterinary management, pharmaceutical pain control, joint supplementation, laser therapy, or other interventions is non-negotiable. The behavioral transformation I've seen in cats whose pain was finally addressed properly is remarkable. And when the case is complex, or home management alone isn't producing improvement, referral to a board-certified veterinary behaviorist is the right next step. I want to be clear, you cannot always prevent a cat from having a low stimulation threshold, especially if that threshold was shaped by early life experiences, genetics, or the normal process of aging. What you absolutely can change, starting today, is how you respond to it. And that alone is genuinely transformative. The single most impactful thing you can do right now is spend 30 seconds observing your cat before every petting session. Look at their body posture, the position of their tail, the set of their ears. Is this cat in a receptive state? A cat who seeks you out, rubs their face against you, or performs a slow blink in your direction is extending a clear invitation. That is your green light. A cat who is already alert, body tense, pupils engaged, watching something outside the window, is not in a mental state that welcomes physical contact, even if they don't immediately protest. Second, stop using punishment in response to biting. Spraying water, tapping, raising your voice, none of these address the underlying problem. All of them damage trust, and every one of them increases your cat's overall stress level, which, as we've established, makes the biting worse. The behavioral science here is unambiguous. Third, if you live with children, please teach them the warning signals. Children are statistically the most common recipients of cat bites precisely because they haven't been taught feline body language. This is a preventable safety issue, and it starts with education. And finally, and I want to emphasize this clearly, if the biting is new, sudden, or escalating in a cat without a previous biting history, please treat it as a clinical sign and see your veterinarian before attempting any behavioral intervention. Pain is always the first thing to rule out. I know it can feel personal when your cat bites you. I know it's discouraging, especially when you love them and you're genuinely just trying to show them affection. But now you know that the bite is not a rejection, it's a communication, a very direct, very clear one, and you have the tools to respond to it differently. The tail flick, the skin ripple, the ear rotation, the sudden tension in their body. Your cat has been talking to you all along. From today on, you'll hear it. If you haven't scheduled a routine checkup for your cat recently, please do that soon, and mention the biting to your veterinarian specifically. It matters more than you might think. If this video helped you understand your cat a little better, share it with another cat owner. You might be saving someone from a bite and saving a cat from being misunderstood. Leave me a comment below. Does your cat have a specific sweet spot where they absolutely love being touched? Tell me where. I read every single one. Big hug, take good care of your little one, and I'll see you in the next video.